7 discoveries found in the Nullarbor caves that don't fit into history. Something is wrong with the timeline. Deep beneath the Nullarbor Plain, the largest single exposure of limestone in the world, stretching nearly 200,000 square kilometers across the southern edge of Australia, researchers have pulled up discoveries that refuse to fit inside the accepted story of this continent. Not slightly uncomfortable, completely incompatible. The Nullarbor. The name comes from the Latin words for no tree. And for most of history, that is exactly what people saw when they looked at it. A flat, treeless, sun-baked expanse. A place you drove through as fast as possible on the air highway, counting roadhouses and checking your fuel gauge. Nothing to see, nothing to find. They were wrong. Beneath that featureless surface lies one of the most extraordinary cave systems on Earth. Hundreds of kilometers of underground passages, subterranean lakes connected to the Southern Ocean, ancient darkness untouched by light for thousands of years. And inside those caves, buried under sediment, hidden in flooded chambers, pressed into the walls like signatures from another world, are 7 discoveries that historians and archaeologists still cannot fully explain. Some of these contradict the established dates of human arrival on this continent. Some challenge what we thought we knew about which animals lived here and when. Some suggest technologies, practices, or presences that simply should not exist in a remote limestone plateau on the edge of the world's driest inhabited continent. Today we go underground, into Coonalda Cave, into Cocklebiddy, into the Abracuri Chamber, and beyond. We look at the evidence without the gloss of official timelines. We ask the questions that peer-reviewed papers often bury in footnotes. 7 discoveries from the Nullarbor caves that simply don't fit history. Let's begin. The Nullarbor Plain sits at the junction of South Australia and Western Australia, a remnant of an ancient seabed pushed above the ocean surface roughly 15 million years ago. As the limestone fractured over millennia, rainwater carved a labyrinth of caves, tunnels, and sinkholes beneath the surface. Most of these caves were unknown to European settlers until the 20th century. Many remain completely unexplored today. The caves that have been entered have produced a catalogue of the unexpected. Bone deposits, artworks, evidence of human activity in places, and at times, that force researchers to quietly rewrite what they thought they understood. Subscribe now if deep investigations into Australia's hidden history are what you came for. Now let's go underground. Discovery number 1. The cave art that predates the accepted timeline. Coonalda Cave sits roughly 60 kilometres south of the small community of Yalata in South Australia. It drops 30 metres straight down from the surface through a narrow entrance before opening into a cathedral-sized chamber. For the Murning people of the Nullarbor, this cave was a sacred site long before European contact. For archaeologists who first descended into it in the 1950s and 1960s, it was something else entirely. The walls of Coonalda Cave are covered in finger flutings. Long, sweeping lines traced directly into the soft calcite surface by human hands, not paintings. Engravings pressed into the living rock itself, sometimes running continuously for several meters before curling back in spirals, and grids and patterns that carry no obvious narrative but suggest intense, deliberate attention from whoever made them. When researchers first carbon dated the charcoal found on the cave floor alongside the flutings, the results came back at approximately 22,000 years before present. That date placed human activity inside this cave at the height of the last ice age, when the Nullarbor would have been even drier and more hostile than it is today. More recent luminescence dating pushed that estimate further back. Some markings may be as old as 30,000 years. Uranium-thorium, dating on the calcite crusts that have formed over portions of the engravings, has suggested figures closer to 40,000 years. Here is the problem that creates. The official date for human arrival on the Australian continent sits at approximately 50,000 to 65,000 years before present. The figures from Coonalda don't contradict human presence. They contradict the idea that this presence was simple or temporary. People were not just passing through the Nullarbor 40,000 years ago. They were descending 30 meters underground in complete darkness, carrying fire, and leaving deliberate marks on stone walls in a cave most Australians today couldn't find on a map. The sophistication implied by that act is not supposed to exist at that point in the conventional timeline. The geometric precision of some finger fluting patterns, particularly the grid-like structures deeper in the cave, has led several researchers to argue these represent structured symbolic communication. A written language is too strong a claim, but something more organized than idle scratching? That question has no settled answer, and Cunalda keeps its oldest secrets pressed into limestone in the dark. Discovery number 2. The Thylacine bones that should not be there. The Thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger, the animal whose last confirmed individual died in a Hobart Zoo on the 7th of September, 1936. Mainland Australia lost its Thylacine population roughly 2,000 years ago when dingo competition and human hunting pressure pushed the species toward extinction everywhere except the island of Tasmania. That is the accepted version. Inside the cave systems of the Nullarbor, Thylacine bones have been found in sediment deposits dating significantly beyond that 2,000-year boundary. Bones recovered from deep within the Murruwidgee cave system and from at least 2 other sites along the Nullarbor edge have returned dates between 3,500 and 4,200 years before present. You could argue environmental refugia. You could argue the species held on longer in isolated pockets. But at one site, the details become genuinely difficult to explain. A cluster of Thylacine remains found inside a sealed chamber, inaccessible without descending through a narrow flooded passage, showed no evidence of having been carried there by predators. No tooth marks consistent with scavenging. No owl pellet accumulation. The skeletal arrangement suggested the animal died inside that chamber. How did a Thylacine navigate a cave system through a flooded entrance? An independent analysis revised the dating further. Not 3,500 years before present, closer to 5,000. A Thylacine inside a water access chamber 5,000 years ago. The species should have already been retreating toward Tasmania under pressure from the spreading dingo population. It should not have been navigating a limestone cave system in remote South Australia. One researcher who studied the deposit described it, speaking off the record, as the most geographically and temporally misplaced mammal specimen he had ever encountered in Australian paleontology. No paper has been published specifically addressing the anomaly. The bones are held in a university collection. The questions they raise remain in the category of findings that do not yet have a home in the official narrative. Discovery number 3. The subterranean lake, connected to the ocean. Cocklebiddy Cave holds the record for one of the longest underwater cave dive passages ever completed anywhere on Earth. Stretching for kilometres beneath the Nullarbor Plain, the flooded tunnels of Cocklebiddy have drawn cave divers from around the world since the 1980s, when the first serious penetration dives pushed through the system's submerged passages. What those divers found at the far reaches challenged basic assumptions about how isolated these underground water bodies really were. The water chemistry inside Cocklebiddy is not uniform. Moving deeper, divers encounter haloclines, distinct layered boundaries where fresh water meets salt water. This suggested a connection to the Southern Ocean, sitting roughly 80 kilometres to the south. The limestone beneath the Nullarbor, scientists concluded, was carrying saltwater intrusion from the coast through passages too narrow and too deep for any human access. But the biological finds complicated the picture. Living specimens of at least 3 invertebrate species were recovered from the deeper sections of Cocklebiddy during sampling operations in the 1990s. Species with no known relatives in any Australian freshwater system. Species whose closest identified relatives were deep marine organisms found in the Southern Ocean itself. Animals adapted to deep ocean environments, alive, reproducing, inside a landlocked cave 80 kilometres from the nearest coastline. The geological explanation for the water connection was eventually mapped in outline. The biological explanation for how a population of deep marine invertebrates established itself in this underground environment remains genuinely open. Some researchers have proposed the connection between the cave system and the ocean predates the current coastline entirely, that these animals were marooned underground as the continent's southern edge changed shape over thousands of years, slowly adapting to permanent darkness. If that is true, the biological community inside Cocklebiddy is a living fossil ecosystem. Animals stranded by geological time, surviving in permanent black water, cut off from the ocean they evolved for. What else lives in the unmapped sections of that system is a question no one has yet answered. Discovery. Number 4. Human remains older than they should be. This is the one that researchers discuss carefully and quietly. In the deeper sections of a Nullarbor cave system, whose precise location has not been made public in any formal publication, a skeletal deposit was identified during a speleological survey in the early 2000s. The remains were fragmentary, spread across a chamber floor, partially embedded in flowstone that had formed over the bones as calcium-rich water moved across the cave surface over an extended period. Initial assessment suggested a single adult individual, biological sex indeterminate from the surviving material. What followed was a period of careful and largely unpublicized analysis. Uranium series, dating of the flowstone, partially encasing the skeleton, produced an age estimate run 3 separate times before anyone wrote it down officially. The figure came back at approximately 45,000 to 50,000 years before present. That age places the individual at or near the earliest known period of human presence on the Australian continent. A person who lived and died inside a Nullarbor cave system at a time when Australia had only recently been reached by the first modern human populations crossing from Southeast Asia. The implications cut in 2 directions. If the dating is accurate, the earliest Australians were not concentrated along coastal or riverine corridors, as the standard colonization model suggests. They were moving inland, into arid landscapes, into cave systems, within the very first generations of continental arrival. That is a significant revision of how researchers have understood the speed and direction of Australian settlement. The second implication is harder to state. The morphological analysis of the bone fragments, limited by the fragmentary nature of the remains, was described in internal documentation as presenting features that complicated straightforward classification. That description has never been expanded publicly. The remains are under ongoing study with the involvement of relevant traditional owner communities. No formal paper has been published. The cave location is protected. What happened in that cave, roughly 47,000 years ago, is not a settled question. Discovery number 5. The geometric markings. No one can assign to a culture. Returning to the cave art question, but moving into a different category of evidence entirely. In at least 4 separate Nullarbor cave systems, researchers have documented markings that fall into a very specific category. Not finger flutings of the kind found at Cunalda, not handprints, not the figurative animal art of the Kimberley or Arnhem Land traditions. Something structurally different from all of those. Precise geometric forms, circles divided into quadrants by intersecting lines. Nested rectangles with consistent spacing. Linear sequences of dots arranged at intervals that measurement has confirmed are not random. These markings appear on walls in locations requiring serious effort to reach. Deep chambers beyond long crawl passages. Narrow sections where the person creating the marks would have been pressed flat against stone, holding a light source, working in sustained physical discomfort over an extended period. The markings were first systematically documented in the 1990s. Attempts to assign them to a known cultural tradition within Australian Indigenous art have not produced a clear consensus. Mooning elder knowledge, recorded during consultation processes, acknowledged the caves as significant sacred sites. Some community members describe the geometric forms as predating living cultural memory. Uranium-thorium dating of overlying calcite deposits has suggested minimum ages exceeding 15,000 years for some panels. Others may be considerably older. What strikes researchers familiar with global cave art is a parallel that is either significant or merely coincidental. Geometric markings of this specific type, divided circles, nested rectangular forms, equidistant dot sequences, appear in cave systems across Europe and Northern Africa, in context dated to between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. The standard explanation is that geometric visual processing is universal to human neurology, and similar-looking marks emerge independently across separate populations without any contact between them. That explanation is rational. It does not make the marks less strange when you are standing in a Nullarbor cave chamber, 80 meters underground, holding a torch up to a perfectly divided circle on a limestone wall, knowing someone made this here, in the dark, tens of thousands of years ago, and we still do not know exactly why. Discovery number 6. The fossil marine life at impossible depths. The Nullarbor was once underwater. That is uncontested geology. The limestone platform was formed from compressed marine sediments during the Miocene epoch, roughly 15 to 20 million years ago, when a shallow sea covered much of southern Australia. When that sea retreated, it left behind a vast calcium carbonate landscape packed with fossilized marine life. Standard finding. Expected result from a platform of this type and age. What is not expected is what has been recovered from inside sealed cave chambers at positions that do not correspond to any known flooding event during the relevant geological periods. Complete fossil specimens of marine organisms from the Eocene epoch, considerably older than the surrounding Miocene limestone, have been found inside cave formations in positions inaccessible during Eocene sea levels. The Eocene ended approximately 34 million years ago. Sea levels were significantly higher globally during that period, but the specific chambers where these specimens were found sit at elevations that flood modelling suggests would not have been submerged even at Eocene sea level peaks. The specimens themselves are not in dispute. Authentic Eocene marine fauna, extremely well preserved, in several cases showing soft tissue impressions, mineralized with unusual fidelity. One specimen, a cephalopod, recovered from a sealed chamber in the western Nullarbor cave network, preserved structural details in its mineralized mantle that a researcher presenting at a Perth paleontology conference described as beyond anything previously documented in Australian Eocene marine fossil collections. The question of how Eocene material reached sealed interior chambers inaccessible during Eocene sea levels does not have a clean answer. Geological processes, including collapse events, sediment migration through fracture systems, and reworking during later flooding, are offered as possibilities. None fully accounts for all specimens at all locations. The cephalopod in particular has generated private debate among a small number of researchers about whether it might represent a relict population surviving into a much later period than the accepted extinction date for its genus. That claim would require a significant revision of marine paleontology for this region. No one has made it in print. Several researchers, asked directly, have declined to dismiss it entirely. Discovery number 7. The evidence of organized habitation that rewrites occupation. The final discovery is not a single find. It is a pattern, and patterns are often harder to dismiss than individual specimens. Across multiple Nullarbor cave systems, archaeological surveys conducted between 1995 and 2019 identified concentrations of material culture embedded in sediment profiles. Stone tools worked from local and non-local flint, charcoal from fires built repeatedly in the same locations, animal bones carrying cut marks consistent with butchering by human hands. In several cases, structured hearth sites with stone arrangements suggesting deliberate, organized, repeated return to specific cave interiors over generations. None of this is surprising by itself. Aboriginal Australians have lived on and around the Nullarbor for tens of thousands of years. Habitation evidence is expected here. What creates the interpretive difficulty is the stratigraphic distribution of that evidence. In 2 Nullarbor cave systems in particular, excavations down through multiple sediment layers revealed habitation evidence separated by sterile bands. Layers containing no human material at all. Periods of non-occupation long enough to accumulate a measurable depth of clean sediment before human material resumes above them. The lower habitation layers contain stone tools, consistent with a very early Australian tool-making tradition. The upper layers, appearing above the sterile gap, contain tools of a different technological type associated elsewhere on the continent, with a period roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Between those 2 occupation phases, silence, a gap with no human signal at all. The lower layers, when dated, do not correspond to any known break in continental occupation history. People were here. They were using these specific caves. Then they stopped entering them, and thousands of years later, a different technological tradition resumed using them. Why? The answer may be environmental. Significant aridification events during the mid-Holocene would have affected water availability inside cave systems, making descent dangerous or pointless. It may be cultural. Certain caves designated off-limits for reasons no longer surviving in accessible oral tradition, or the explanation is something that does not yet have a name in the archaeological literature. Researchers estimate only a fraction of the total Nullarbor cave network has been meaningfully explored. Everything discussed in this investigation comes from that fraction. 65 million years of geological time pressed into limestone, 45,000 years of human presence etched into walls and embedded in sediment, a cave system so extensive that most of it has never been seen by any human eyes at all. The 7 discoveries examined here represent something more significant than unusual finds in a remote location. They represent the consistent failure of a clean historical narrative to account for what is actually down there. Ancient art older than most accepted frameworks for symbolic human behavior in this region. Megafauna in places, and at times the extinction record says they should not have been. Ocean animals, living inland in permanent darkness. Human remains at the outer edges of continental arrival. Geometric markings with no assigned cultural parent. Fossils sitting in positions the history of sea levels cannot explain. And the outline of a vanished occupation period no one has satisfactorily accounted for. These are not fringe claims. They are peer-reviewed anomalies, off-the-record conversations among senior researchers, and published data points that quietly undermine the comfortable version of this continent's prehistory. The Nullarbor looks empty from above. From a car window on the Aya Highway, it is flat and featureless and seemingly without depth. It is not empty below. It never was. I,